We have now officially entered the season of Advent, a time of waiting and preparation and anticipation for what is to come, the birth of Christ. We read familiar scriptures and we sing carols of hope and joy, and we may wonder how this ancient story is relevant in 2025. The theme for this Advent series, From a Sanctified Art, feels particularly relevant right now, at least to me. What do you fear? Insisting on hope this Advent. And this morning, as we begin to explore the first part of this series, I want to begin by focusing on that question. What do you fear? I wonder if we pause for just a moment, how you might answer that question. I don't know about you, but I feel it in my gut. What do you fear? We could probably spend an entire hour just talking about the various answers you each bring to that question. I had some ideas about what some of you might say and what I might say, but I thought I'd Google the question, what do you fear, to get some other ideas. And I was surprised that the first two answers in my Google search results in the AI interview were a somewhat self-reflective response from Google itself, which, to be honest, leaves me a bit fearful. How the concept of fear applies to Google search. Fear of being unable to provide useful information. A core function of Google search is to be helpful. Therefore, a negative outcome is a failure to fulfill this function, which can be described as a type of fear of being unhelpful or providing incorrect information. And number two, fear of misuse. Another fear could be a concern about being used for malicious or harmful purposes, as this would contradict its core principles of providing beneficial information. But after wrestling with how I feel about AI answering my question from its own perspective, I did think about more the typical group gathered here on a Sunday morning, those in person, those online, as well as the Elizabethtown community outside the walls of this building, and the communities outside the walls of the places where you may be sitting as you watch this online. And here are some things that I thought might be answers to that question. What do you fear? Spiders, snakes, heights, public speaking, being lied to or cheated on, dying, the loss of a loved one to death, to addiction, to a broken relationship, to distance or time, not having enough money to pay for Christmas gifts or to pay the bills or to buy groceries, instability in governance of this nation or of other places, with leaders that seem focused on self-interest and wealth building for a few at the top. Some may fear being disappeared or deported. Some may fear losing the right to love who you love or will live with your true identity. Fear is real. Some of you have experienced some of these fears in real time. And yet, even while recognizing the reality of these fears, how might we still be attentive to the hope that might be found in our midst? I think it is important to name from the get-go that the hope that I name is not a hope that rests in, but everything will be okay. Because sometimes it's not. Sometimes terrible things happen, and sometimes things get better, and sometimes they don't. But the hope that I am focused on is a hope that might be found in noticing where and when and how God breaks in, even during traumas and tragedies, even through our fear. Earlier in this month of November, as temperatures dropped and branches became bare, an interesting phenomenon developed at our house. Outside our kitchen window, on a mess of tangly, prickly branches about 6 feet high, wound around a trellis leaning against a stone wall, one single pink rose began to bloom. Over the past few weeks, through wind and rain and a couple pretty significant frosts and this morning's snow, this picture is from this morning, it is still blooming. And when I saw the piece that Karen had already planned to play for this morning's gathering music, Lo, How a Rose Ere Blooming, which is one of my favorites, I realized that this might be one possible image to represent the hope of God breaking in. Lo, how a rose ere blooming from tender stem hath sprung. It came a flower bright amid the cold of winter. It also might be a good symbol for climate change, which I suppose we can add to our list of fears. But even in the midst of the trauma that our planet is experiencing, even in the midst of brisk cold of winter approaching, at least here in South Central Pennsylvania, here is an unexpected, delicate, surprisingly sustaining glimpse of beauty. In the Luke 1 text for this morning, the author of this gospel begins with intention by focusing on the unexpected. Zechariah and Elizabeth are an unexpected example. They are both quite old, and they have been unable to have a child, which would have been a sure sign of both social and spiritual security. And yet God breaks in. So much so that Zechariah is startled, disturbed, gripped with fear, as the NIV translates the Greek verb tarasso here. And the very first thing the divine presence says to him is, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard." The promise of a baby at this point in their lives isn't going to solve all of Zechariah and Elizabeth's problems. They are very old, after all, and as a person who knows what is involved in childbirth and raising young children, this will not be an easy task. And as the gospel tells us right at the beginning, they are living in the time of Herod. This situates their lives in a time of Roman rule, empire that is built on maintaining peace through violent power. In his book, The Politics of Jesus, Hendricks writes about this historical period, with Herod as client king of Judea, and Hendricks discusses how this social, political, and economic milieu shaped the environment in which Jesus was born and raised, and influenced Jesus' own political perspectives. For example, Hendricks shares an account recorded by the ancient historian Josephus, a report that around the time of Jesus' birth, 2,000 people were mass crucified in the ancient Galilean city of Sepphoris as a punishment for rebelling against Roman rule. Not only does this help us remember that crucifixion was not a unique punishment created for Jesus, but Hendricks draws connections between more contemporary social settings and the time of the Roman Empire. Quote, "Some sense of the effect that the horror at Sepphoris would have had upon the collective psyche of Israel, including the young Jesus, can be seen in the response of African Americans to the lynching of 14-year-old Emmett Till in 1955. Till's torture and murder induced terror and revulsion in the Black community. The grisly images and gruesome descriptions of Till's mutilated body and the naked fear they raised remain emblazoned to this day in the memory of all who had the misfortune to be exposed to them. The horrific victimization of Till and their powerlessness in preventing or addressing it only deepened the sense of dread in the 20 million African Americans living under the specter of Jim Crow and institutional racism. It is not hard to imagine that the Romans' crucifixion of 2,000 men, women, and children would have struck the same deep fear and dread in the 2.5 million subjugated inhabitants of first century Israel. End quote. And I reflect on the videos we see today on social media of immigrants and persons of color right now being arrested and disappeared, seemingly without respect for their constitutional rights and basic humanity. And this is the situation in which Zechariah and Elizabeth live. So it may be no wonder that Zechariah is gripped with fear when an unexpected being appears next to the altar where Zechariah is completing his priestly duties. Not only is he fearful of the unexpected presence, and he is steeped in a fear-filled world, but he may feel trepidation at the unexpected news. Reverend Dr. Boyoung Lee, a feminist communitarian theologian and professor at Iliff School of Theology, writes the following: like Zechariah, we may grow so used to disappointment that when hope finally arrives, it startles us. When God interrupts, we flinch. So when the angel says, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah, for your prayer has been heard," it is not a dismissal. It is a reorientation. Your fear is real, but it is not the only truth. God has already been listening. God enters the silence, the ache, the barrenness, into the very place where fear has taken root. And God's response begins not with a miracle, but with recognition. Your prayer has been heard. End quote. Dr. Lee continues, in a season of waiting, we are not asked to suppress fear, but to face it, to ask, how does fear live in me? What voices has it amplified? What longings has it silenced? Earlier this week, I heard the news report that, once again, a massive kidnapping occurred in Nigeria, bringing back memories of the kidnapping of Chibok students in 2014. And this most recent is just another in a long series of kidnappings and village burnings and other violent actions by bandits in various areas of Nigeria. And I wondered, as I often have wondered, how do our Nigerian siblings experience the presence of God in the midst of chaos and violence that is part of their daily lives? I think that Bethany Theological Seminary's presence is one example, facilitating nonviolent peace-building efforts amidst an environment of fear and violence.
In communities across Nigeria, students and alumni of Bethany Theological Seminary Biblical Peacemaking Program are turning learning into actions through the practicums and the different peacemaking initiatives they are involved in respectively. They are not just learning about peace, they are actually making peace.
So as part of my role, I get to know the students very well. I get to work with them, find out where they're coming from, and it's really quite amazing because they come from all over the country, from all kinds of different backgrounds, different denominations.
My interest in biblical peacemaking came out of just watching and experiencing the chaos around us, between communities, even in the church. Studying biblical peacemaking gives me the tool to be able to speak and enable people to mediate and negotiate through the challenges of the chaos in our world. And that was what led me into my current practicum.
Part of the things that happen in JOS is the incident crisis, and it has pushed children to become orphans. What I do as a musician is using my skill and my music to bring peace and hope into the hearts of as many children as we can. I work with Sounds of Hope, running my practicum. We move to orphanages and meet these children, get to teach them music, use the skills I've learned from school to find a way of giving them hope and peace in their hearts.
I came to this house in 2018 because of a war that happened in Yelwa, and both my parents were killed. Coming to Kingdom Kids Club was a blessing because I felt love again. Anytime I touch the keyboard, I feel happy.
I'm coming from a violent area where crisis has actually ravaged my community, and it's something that is still ongoing. And there's that need for me to look for ways of how I should bring peace in my community. Ever since I came, I studied in Bethany Theological Seminary. What I preach has actually changed. Considering the impact of this training, I know the true meaning of forgiveness. I know the true meaning of love, to love my enemy and to also do good to my enemy. After my graduation, I have been working, trying to raise funds to help people who have been displaced and support them, helping them and teaching them to forgive.
We would like to thank Bethany Theological Seminary, the team that brought this course to Nigeria. We are very grateful. Thank you for equipping the church.
How might we be open to the movement and inbreaking of the Spirit in our times of fear and uncertainty, and in ourselves when we fear? I don't think do not fear is an instruction to not feel fear, but an instruction to be mindful of the possibilities that await when we don't allow fear to consume us. This is not a hope that is blind to realities, not a hope that simply says everything is going to be fine, because it might not be, but a hope that encourages us to name, to speak about that for which we long, to call for God's presence in the midst of pain and confusion and turmoil and challenge. This is a hope that encourages us to pay attention, to notice the sacredness of unexpected things that give us strength, that make us feel brave or even just stable in the midst of a world that often makes us feel scared or powerless. This is a hope that reminds us that the presence of divine love can generate in us the energy to respond, because we live in hope that God hears our call and that God is and will continue to be present in surprising and unexpected ways. Like a rose blooming in the cold of winter, like non-violent peace building in the midst of chaos and violence, like a baby born to demonstrate a new kind of power, a power fueled by love and justice and hope and humility. May it be so.